It's time for Cristianos. Cristianos is the essence of Aquaforce in Standard. When this unit attacks a Vanguard, you can Energy Blast 4 and choose one of your rearguards and stand it. That unit and this unit will get plus 5k. Wait, what do you mean that's the skill the Brandgate one? Since when does Brandgate get a Lambros? So what's the real skill? Energy Blast 4, Revive 2, blah blah blah. Wait, what? This is granblue! Cristianos is a deck that acts like granblue, where it takes advantage of the revival mechanic using the Energy Blast resource. It takes advantage of reviving beaters such as Severin and also Valantia, where Severin can also use its skill to potentially get a 4th attack in. On rare occasions, you can technically get to 5 attacks, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a 4 attack deck moving forward on turn 4. To further set up the drop zone, we rely on cards that accelerate milling, such as Hendrina and also Bilber. This in tandem with Nectar is able to build enough of a drop zone of quality, but both in quantity as well. You're able to get the additional crit on turn 3 moving forward and apply that pressure, especially since on turn 3, more than likely you'll be doing 3 attacks. But after that, turn 4 and after, you'll be able to do 4 attacks, whereas Severin has that high power and crit pressure. Check out Dueling Guard's deck boxes, playmats, and binders. They're great quality products that are anime based. They continually have more anime options becoming available. Use the affiliated link in the description for a 5% discount on your next purchase. Starting with the ride line, you can play any starter that you want to. We do use the new ride line from the set itself for Cristianos, mainly because it helps us selectively mill certain cards that we draw into. This can also be a 13k booster when later on revived as well. We also take advantage of the grade 2 because the name is needed, but essentially when the grade 3 is written upon, you can actually superior call a grade 1, which could be the booster itself here from the right line. We also have phenomenal targets such as Bilber and the Dragon Tree grade 1 that we do play in this deck that are also phenomenal targets that we can use. Not to mention the accelerated milling helps to have more of a choice as well. And if you do use Bilber early on, before you actually write to grade 3, then you can reuse the Bilber again, depending if you have Soul. The second skill doesn't come up as much because you'll be relying on cards such as Valantia and Severin being revived by Cristianos. But if it does come up, it's nice shield. Of course, Cristianos is our main boy. The first skill is able to counterblast and search for another copy, which guarantees the personal ride in the following turn, but it also gives itself 10k, making your Vanguard pretty much standalone, and then you can dedicate the boosters onto the side columns. The second skill uses Energy Blast 4 to be able to discard 2 from the deck and then revive 2 cards. This keeps basically the drop zone quantity the same, which comes up with Nectar. So you want to make sure that you have the right amount of cards in drop zone to maximize on the benefit of Nectar. What's also really cool about this card is that it's just Energy Blast to revive stuff. You're not susceptible to damage denial technically, and also you don't rely on the soul as much when it comes to the revival aspect, which leaves room then for other cards in the rest of the main deck to help with the consistency with this deck to function correctly. For the main deck, for the grade 3s, we are playing 3 more copies of Cristianos. Since we're accelerated milling, we want to make sure that we at least have a copy or 2 left in the main deck whenever we do search for it. This is a +1, but it also helps guarantee that Persona Ride moving forward too. There's also a chance that you are able to blindly soul charge a copy as well, but that doesn't happen as often, and I wouldn't recommend to rely on that, but when it does happen, definitely take advantage of it. 4 copies of Severin. This is basically our go-to beater. It gets 10k when it's revived, and you have a Cristianos Vanguard, and then it retires itself at the end of the turn, so that way you can just revive it later on in the following turns. This is super helpful because then you don't have to worry about like intercepting or trying to call all the cards on top of it. Similar aspects that Zorga had to do with like Roman Priest and Dragon, for example, but this Severin just cleans itself up. The second skill is a Soul Blast skill. It looks like Cristiano as being standing in that current position, but it also gives the Vanguard plus 5k, and then it restands if you Soul Blast at a grade 3 with Cristianos in the name. It's very specific. So Bushiroad was very intentional on making sure this wasn't abused, especially in tandem with a card like Nectar. And what I realized too, it's not a big deal if you don't get 5 attacks. Really the deck functions as a 4 attack deck on turn 4 moving forward. And so with just having 1 restander live, then it doesn't feel as bad not being able to take advantage on Nectar on multiple units. Nectar can just be focused on that 1 unit that you know you're going to restand. Onto the grade 2s. In addition to Severin, we have Valantia, and so these are cards that you want to see in your initial mulligan as well, and discard them in the right line as well. So that way it's another way to help guarantee them in the drop zone as well. And Valantia is just the grade 2 version where it also gets 10k when it's revived, and it's also, you know, Cristianos Vanguard too. This is kind of like the backup if you don't have Devil Severin, but more than likely you should. So she's really just a backup, and just having the consistency of having enough beaters to be able to do turn 3, turn 4, and so on. Onto our mill engine. So we do play 4 copies of Hendrina. On place, mill 3. This is actually really synergetic with Bilber too, because Bilber can actually call this and then you can like chain further milling. But this is also a card that you want to see in your first mulligan, so you start heading to that drop zone as quickly as possible too. This is also great during turn 2, so that way you can commit cards early on and actually apply some pressure with 2 to 3 attacks essentially. And then when your opponent attacks, you can try to stay at low damage with intercepting with these cards. You want to make room basically for your Severin and also your Phalantias anyway, so intercepting these are actually pretty crucial. One of the things I noticed about this deck is that it felt like it needed some draw power to an extent, and also a way to also further like Soul Blast cards out, especially if you don't see Bilbo right away. And so I thought of cards like Margaret, where essentially if you discard them during the right phase, then you can actually Soul Blast 1, bottom deck this card, and draw a card. So this helps a little bit dig deeper into the deck where you want to see certain combo pieces, and this basically helps filters itself out while giving you a +1 still. I just added 3 copies just to have it. If you don't see it, it's not the end of the world, but when you do see it, then you can actually start playing around where you Soul Blast and get some advantage there. As I was playing cards such as like Bilber and also like Margaret and any other Soul Blasters, over time you're going to maybe have an empty soul. And a good opportunity card is the Cairo over here, the Grade 2. So essentially, if you don't have any soul, you can blindly Soul Charge 2. So having to be able to Soul Charge 2 helps you not worry so much, because we also have the Grade 1 Dragon Tree that also Soul Blasts. So you need soul for that card to be able to grab cards such as Nectar, which means then you want to make sure you have your Cristianos still in soul for Severin. And of course, over time, as you're riding up, you're going to be Soul Blasting and you need to replenish your soul somehow. So I felt like a card like Cairo can be taken advantage because of it Soul Charges 2 cards versus a 1 card. There's other cards in stoicheia that can also blindly Soul Charge 1 card, but I feel like if you're able to Soul Charge 2, then why not take advantage of it? There's a slight chance that you can also Soul Charge Cristianos, but I wouldn't rely on that. But if it does come up again, you know, just take advantage of it. Sometimes I actually put this behind the Vanguard just to be able to get the resource, and then I set up my columns properly, because it is a 9k Grade 2, so it doesn't really even hit other Grade 2 that are 10ks as well. Onto the orders, we were playing 1 Bracing Angel Ladder, so I also wanted another card to be able to add to the soul if needed. This is also a plus against the Shiranui matchup, so if you feel like you're going to deal with a lot of that and you want to play this stack, definitely take advantage of Bracing Angel Ladder for that case. You don't have to play this card because I know it is pricey as well, and if you want this to be more of a fun deck, you could play different cards as well. You could play the 4th Nectar. Right now I'm playing 3, which I think suffices for me, but if you want to add the 4th one, you can too. And again, Nectar is the one that gives 5k for every 5 cards in the drop zone, and once you hit that 15, it also gets an additional crit. This deck has the ability to actually hit 20 to 25 to 30 cards in drop zone pretty quickly by turn 4, if not turn 5 at the latest, and making Severin pretty easily over 50k, 60k numbers with a crit. Basically, it demands the opponent to drop the PGs against that column, and if they don't have a PG, they have to drop a lot of cards to guard that. Onto the Grade 1s, we were playing 3 Bilber. So Bilber is really that card that helps us build a drop zone, but you're able to Superior Call one of the top 3 cards as well. So it's not able to attack that turn, so you are better off calling boosters as well. But you can call cards like Hendrina, like I mentioned before, to further extend milling. And that's okay if it doesn't be able to attack. The fact that you can continue to mill is going to help you more long term anyway. This is also a great target for the right chain to be able to revive it too. So if you wanted to use Bilber more than once with the same copy, that's your opportunity too. And if you've milled this card even with Hendrina and you didn't initially have Bilber, by the time you revive it, then you can use Bilber at that point to still get some benefit at that point. We have the Dragon Tree Grade 1. This is helpful because of its 2nd skill. You can Counter Blast, Soul Blast 1, grab a normal order from the drop and add it to your hand. This is what really takes advantage of the accelerated milling that we're doing already. So if you do mill cards like Nectar, you can just grab it from the drop as well. You could also reuse the same Nectar too, where you play Nectar first and then use the skill before you go into your battle phase, and then just grab the same copy and then you'll have it for next turn. Sometimes I like to also use the ability just to have an extra card in hand that you can use as discard fodder for a perfect guard as well. Both Bilber and this Grade 1 use the soul, so depending on the timing and the usage of this, you can definitely take advantage of Cairo at that point when to properly soul charge more while getting the benefit of these cards still. We were playing 3 of the Grade 1 PG, pretty standard. And then of course 1 Sanctitude, just being able to 1 card PG against certain decks as well, and it's a blitz order too, so it's not that bad. So why not take advantage of it? Onto the triggers, we're playing 4 crit with the effect. This is actually pretty important sometimes because you'll be able to use your soul on one turn, but then if you don't follow with extra soul for the following turn, you may not be able to use your grade 1 to get nectar without sacrificing a Cristianos that you've ridden over at that point. So just having additional soul or ways to get more soul is appreciative. This also makes numbers if you give it to like a Severin column being boosted by 8k. Because of that 2k, it makes that magic number to push another threshold as well. And we also have Viva la Jalapeno, 4 more crit just to have more pressure. So we are playing a total of 8 crit just to have more that granblue aspect where we play as much crit as possible, but also just it's very threatening. And we kind of need it because we, you know, turn 3, more than likely you only have 3 attacks. So it isn't really until turn 4 we even have 4 attacks to have some real pressure at that point. So I decided with 3 draws instead of fronts. So what I noticed with the attack patterns, especially if you put your opponent at 4 damage, more than likely you want to poke with the Severin with crit first. And you can poke twice at that point where it forces them to guard all of that up front. And then if you attack with your Vanguard, your opponent has to decide if they want to risk it on potentially getting credit out of the game. And if they perfect guard, that's a win for you because now that's more cards out of their hand. And if you so happen to get a critical trigger, now you could put it on the remaining column, and now they basically have to guard everything at that point too. Whereas a front, sometimes it forces you to attack with the Vanguard first, but like even with like the patterns, if you do Severin first and then do the Vanguard because you want to take advantage of a front trigger, it just makes it in that awkward position where like they can have a little expectation of what to guard next and stuff like that. And if you don't get the front trigger, then it kind of feels like, eh. So over triggers, I feel like this has flexibility. You can play any over trigger. I just stuck with the Blessed Favor. It's just a good card overall when it happens. You heal, you draw 2 cards, you still get a crit out of it, and your entire front row gets plus 10k, but it's not as important because at that point you're making numbers already. But it's just a good standalone OT. You can play the blue one just to have more crit pressure still, but also getting a card from the drop, which could be useful moving forward, especially if you want to like Persona ride the next turn or potentially just have a PG just to survive as well. The red one, I think, banks a lot on just having the card that you need to take advantage of it. And what I mean by that is that if you attack with Severin twice in a row and you get the red OT later on, you kind of missed out on taking advantage of that Severin once more. We are playing 4 heal, 3 of non-effect, and 1 of the effect. So I am playing the one that checks for restanders basically. And in this metagame, there's even more restanders. So there's Regards that restand now, there's Vanguards that restand as well, such as Varga, for example, Greta, Minerva, so on. But you got Shiranui with their restanders, the Mare, if you face it, you know, and then eventually Prison as well will get a restander too. So it's like all these restanders. I feel like this one is just best suited for the metagame that I'm expecting and playing currently right now. But feel free to change it up for you, whatever makes sense for you. Starting hand, draw for turn. Discard this card. Ride the grade 1 from the right line. Skill of Margaret. Soul Blast. Bottom deck it. Draw a card. Take damage. Your turn now. Draw. Discard Severin to the grade 2 right line. Skill of the grade 1. Draw 2 more. 2 cards. You can discard a combo piece like Severin and then some other card. Currently 2 Severins in the drop. Call Hendrina. Mill 3. These 3. Call the second Hendrina. Mill 3. Attack with the rear guards first. Then the Vanguard. Drive check. Critical. Try to intercept to save you some damage. Go to second damage. Back to you. Stand and draw. Discard this for the right line. Grade 2 skill. Superior Call grade 1. We'll do Bilber. Cristianos skill first. Counterblast to search for a copy. Add to copy. Bilber skill. Retire and Soul Blast. Top 3. Not the greatest, but we'll call this as a booster. You can call the grade 1. Use the skill to Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1 to add Nectar. Call this behind the Vanguard to Soul Charge 2 more cards. Wow. We got lucky right there, actually. Cristiano skill, discard 2, revive, double Severin. Currently in the drop zone, we have 5, 10, 16 cards exactly. Usually turn 3, it's just 3 attacks, but we so happen to soul charge a Cristiano's copy, so that actually makes it 1 to be able to restand. Your opponent's still a grade 2. Activate Nectar, and we could do it on this Severin on the right since it has a bigger booster. Severin on attack skill, Soul Blast 1, will restand at the end of the battle. Severin's 23 plus 15k. 38k with crit, and the battle restands. Attack with the booster. Vanguard is 28, twin drive, and then lastly attack. Retire at the end of the turn. Let's say you take 2 more damage. Stand and draw. Persona ride, draw a card. Cristiano skill. We don't have any copies, but it still gets 10k additional. Grade 1 skill, Counterblast 1. Soul Blast, make sure it's not the Cristiano. Add back a Nectar. We technically have another Nectar, but just having more cards helps. Energy Blast, discard 2 cards. Double Severin. 5, 10, 15, 20, 24 so far in the drop. Call booster to make 25. Now use Nectar on the same one over here, this column. Since it's plus 25 now with crit, similar attack patterns. Soul Bless, the Cristianos. So 33 plus 25 is 58, crit 2, restands. Attack with the column, bigger. Then attack, Twin Drive, into Soul, power here, and attack lastly. And that's the deck profile, amigos. I hope you enjoyed it. This deck is more of a fun deck. I decided to pick it up because, one, yeah, it's stoicheia for sure, but two, I feel like this deck might actually get good enough support moving forward that it might be worth exploring later on too. So I know in the second booster for the Divine set, they're already getting another card that helps with this deck too. But I feel like even in the future sets, there's going to be something that helps speed this up with Severin, and of course, potentially making 5 attacks be possible more consistently too moving forward. So I figured, you know, just take a whack at it, see what I can do at this point. This deck is not like the best deck in the format, but it is a fun deck for me to like just mess around and play with. So if you already like the granblue aesthetic, some usage of orders such as Nectar, definitely give it a try at that point too. What's interesting though, like they made it so that basically even the right lane has the effect ones in the set too for set 1. So the only thing that you need from the start deck is technically Cristianos, but if you can get the other cards from the set and then get some of the cards from prior sets and then maybe pick up Cristianos from TCG Player, if they have any standalone copies, you can do that too as well. And if you want to support the channel, use the affiliate links such as TCG Player, 50 Card Shop, Trading Card Min, Card Trader 0, and also check out Dueling Guard's anime products for swag for deck boxes, playmats, binders, and sleeves as well. On to the next one, amigos. Bye!